All right, Houston Texans, you were on the clock 3 days and about 6 hours away from the NFL draft. We are pumped. We cannot wait to talk about it. We're here with SEC Sports Insider Chad Neipling, who launched this show along with myself 5 weeks ago, Mark Rogers of Mark Rogers TV, and our very special guest, Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.net. Stephen helping us out pretty consistently here. So, Chad, let's dive into the NFL draft, and let's get started with the guy that everybody's talking about as the freak, the number one consensus player. Houston Texans on the clock. Do they take Jadeveon Clowney, and would you take Clowney?
That's kind of a given. Why wouldn't you take Clowney? I know there's been so much speculation, and it's draft time, so we see a lot of smoke screens, right? It's getting closer. So we started hearing news leaking from different GMs and organizations about potential guys that they want to take. Honestly, I think it's a smokescreen. I mean, why wouldn't you take Clowney? The only negative he's got that's been out, it's been out since all through football season, was his lack of want to, so to speak. And I think that that's just something that you've got to take a chance on. And once he gets in there on the NFL, around the coaches and the group there, I think that that's something that doesn't really pan out. I think that he's going to be what he wants to be in the NFL, and I think he's going to be a top defensive end. I think that he's going to put his head down and grind. For me, putting him next to J.J. Watt and putting him underneath a guy to learn from like J.J. Watt, you can't go wrong with that. I mean, having those guys, having to look at luck every year, this puts them right in the mix with that defense, putting pressure on Andrew Luck. And Andrew Luck, we've seen, is a more athletic quarterback than we may have anticipated previously. So I think a guy like Clowney makes sense for Houston to beef up that defense. They've got plenty of picks. They can pick up a quarterback in this quarterback deep class later on and still get somebody that's quality.
All right, Stephen M., Mr. Clowney.
Well, Mark, I agree with everything that Chad has just mentioned. When you talk about Jadeveon Clowney, he's a freak of nature. He's an athlete. You talk about he's got the swim moves, the rip moves, the spin moves inside, every type of a wreck havoc pass rush. Now, there have been some situations, some instances where people claim that he doesn't give his full motor 100%, and that's bogus at times because not every player is going to give 100% on every play. There's going to be a who may take that play off because you're winded. But with Jadeveon Clowney, 9 times out of 10, he's going to put his hand in the ground, he's going to give his 100%, and he's going to make your defense look great. And as Chad mentioned, J.J. Watt needs another player on that defensive line. The Houston Texans have aging linebackers with Brian Cushing, always injury-prone, and, of course, former Alabama standout linebacker DeMeco Ryans getting up in age there. So with Jadeveon Clowney being on that line with J.J. Watt, it provides that second pass rusher to really get after the quarterback, but not just get after the quarterback. Jadeveon Clowney can also stealth the run. So you get a 2-ply deal with Jadeveon Clowney.
Okay, I guess this wouldn't be a very good show if we agreed all the time. So we're going to disagree in pick number 1. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't take Jadeveon Clowney because I think he's the best athlete on the board, and I think at his best he's definitely the best football player on the board. The reason I don't like Clowney is for what you guys just talked about, and I totally understand that no player can give 100% every play. It doesn't happen. But this guy, I have difficulty believing that if he wasn't a grinder, if he wasn't a guy that worked out hard, if he wasn't a guy that gave you and was a guy that would grind it out in the fourth quarter when it was difficult, when it was tough, when you're trying to protect a 3-point lead and the other team's at your 30-yard line, or you need a stop to get the ball back to your offense. If he wasn't a grinder then, I can't believe with $50 or $55 million in his back pocket that he's suddenly going to be a grinder. He's got no incentive to be a grinder now once he gets past the draft. I think he's going to have great games in the NFL. I think maybe his season-long stats are going to be good. I just don't want to be in an AFC championship game with him, needing him to gut it out when he's not in shape, not in great condition, and when it doesn't really mean that much to him. We know that there are football players who want to be on the field, who love the game of football, and freaks of nature who just kind of fall into it. And for me, Jadeveon Clowney's one of those guys. I would probably, boy, I would have a difficult time passing him up because of the obvious, and because my head would be rolling down the hill, chopped off, if I didn't draft him and he turned out to be a great player. The guy that I would pick would have to turn out to be an all-pro. That said, I would do everything I possibly could if I'm the Houston Texans to get out of the #1 pick, get more selections down the line, because it's a very, very deep draft. So I'm not a Clowney fan. I know going into the combine that it was said that Johnny Manziel and Jadeveon Clowney had exactly the same 40 times. When they ran in controlled conditions, Clowney blew them away. But if they're running for a first down marker on a field in the fourth quarter, I'll take Johnny Manziel every time to beat Clowney to the first down marker, because Johnny Manziel is a gamer, Clowney's not. My thoughts on Clowney, Mr. Clowney, yeah, best football player when he's at his best athlete by far. Don't like him on the field, though. All right, we're coming up on number 2.
To add to that real quick, Mark, I think this year we saw, the media, everybody, and probably more so the fan base and where a lot of the opinions come from about him taking reps off. The camera was on him more than any other defensive player has been in a long time. So we got to see what happens when a guy is double and triple teamed all game long. I mean, when you're getting beat up like that from the offensive lineman, or getting chips from fullbacks and running backs all game long, that's going to take a toll on your body. Granted, I agree with what you say. I mean, he's a freak athlete. He should be able to step up to the plate. But I think more or less some of those opinions that we now see have come from the fact that there was so much attention put on him. And we see now that being a defensive lineman is not a pretty position.
I think we also see, though, that he played with a top 5 defense, where some of the better defensive players in the country are constantly double teamed, and they don't have any talent to speak around them. All right, let's go to the number 2 pick. The SEC could possibly get the two top picks, if I can spit it out here. Stephen M. will go to you with the Rams possibly selecting Greg Robinson if we go by this mock draft, the big left tackle out of Auburn. Hey, Stephen M., any thoughts on Greg Robinson going to the Rams at number 2? May have lost Stephen M. for a second. Hopefully he can get back to us. Chad, obviously Greg Robinson, a player that has been looked at on NFL draft boards for a long time. He's not supposed to be the Hall of Fame to be classic left tackle. At the same time, very productive at Auburn, and of course can lead the way on the ground game.
I look at him for a lot of reasons as a guy that I would want to take highly. Just look at the offense that he comes out of. You have to be extremely athletic to be a lineman to play in that type of offense. You already know he's going to be a stout run blocker. He's going to be quick. He's got athleticism. These are things that an lineman on the next level will transition into a great player, and they're things that you would want for your lineman to have, especially if you're a team like St. Louis. That's going to be it's going to rely a little bit more on that protection. They're going to need that to keep Bradford healthy. That's something that's been an issue for them. And a guy like him, being as stout as he is, he can provide that. Now, my question is, for him being selected for the Rams, and the Rams having 2 picks in the first round, which they could really set the tone here, him going there is that he comes from that traditional run block set. Granted, he's very athletic. He's the type of guy that can get downfield. He's a pull player. If he takes the pull, he's going to crush the guy that's in front of him to create the open lane. My question is, as a guy in that style of play, granted, any transitional style from college to NFL is going to be different, but he's going to have to be able to transition to a typical pass protection for a guy like Bradford, because Bradford's not your mobile quarterback. He's your pocket guy. And so for me, that's a transition that I'm curious to see how he makes if he does get picked by St. Louis.
That's if Sam Bradford can stay on the field, which he hasn't been able to do the last few years, and the Rams front office may be growing a little weary of Sam Bradford, who's shown us some flashes and at the same time, he's not had the best talent around him in the passing game, but he's been a little bit brittle and has not stepped up to the plate as we expected coming out of that 2009 NFL draft, if I remember right. Stephen M., I think you're back with us. Any thoughts on the big left tackle out of Auburn, Greg Robinson?
Well, Mark, when you talk about Greg Robinson, the guy's an athlete, as Chad mentioned. He's 6'6", 300 pounds plus. He's a molar that's light on his feet. He can block at the point of attack. He's going to be a great blocking offensive lineman for running back Zach Stacy. And then when you look at his position as a pass blocker, Greg Robinson, like I said, light on his feet, can block at the point of attack, can knock out on a defensive lineman, and also get to the second level and take on a linebacker. And as Chad mentioned, you need that great left tackle to protect the backside of Sam Bradford. He's not your mobile quarterback. He's your drop back pocket guy who's going to want to find receivers downfield. The best way to protect your drop back pocket guy, get a dominant, durable left tackle to protect your blind side. And I feel like getting Greg Robinson is a smart move for the St. Louis Rams and building that offensive line. Because as you and I talked about, Mark, offensive lines win football games. You can have all the skill talent you want, but unless you have those guys in the trenches that can run block up front and protect your quarterback, you're not getting the job done. Greg Robinson is a smart move for head coach Jeff Fisher and that Rams organization.
All right, Jacksonville next at number 3. They need quite a bit there in Jacksonville. Sammy Watkins in this particular mock draft of Clemson going there. I would be shocked if Sammy Watkins wasn't at least a very productive number 2. I mean the basement on Sammy Watkins being a very productive number 2 receiver in the NFL, catching 50, 60 passes, or he could be a star. Watkins will definitely be in that top 5 to 6 range. Cleveland may want him at 4, but this mock draft has the guy that I'm going to make a guess is going to be spoken about and going to be name dropped more than anybody in the NFL draft coming up starting on Thursday, and that's, of course, Texas A&M Heisman Trophy winner Johnny Manziel. All right, Chad, Johnny, what do you got?
What don't you have on this kid? He's an open book when it comes to the media, right? With Johnny Manziel, there's so many intangibles, and there's not a place that he hasn't worked out as of late that the media hasn't been all over. There's potential. There's word coming out this morning that the St. Louis Rams are looking at him pretty heavily. With the top 2 picks in the first round, he could possibly go at number 13 if he lasts that long. Possibility. There's been people that say he may slide out of the first round. I don't see that. I see somebody taking him in the first round, a lot like Tebow went in the first round in 2010. He's got so many intangibles that people are going to look at him and say, this guy is a playmaker. He obviously knows football. He's able to make passes that other people like a Tebow couldn't do. He's a good mix of a Tebow and an actual quarterback player. So he offers up a lot for you. If Jacksonville takes him, that's going to be huge in my opinion, because that Jacksonville needs to put butts in the seats. Bottom line, they need somebody that can bring in some star power to them, and this guy, he fits that. There's also a possibility that, if they take, they may take Jake Matthews out of A&M. Matthews is going to be another highly touted guy that could possibly go there. But if Johnny Manziel steps into the fold in Jacksonville, look for Jacksonville to start trying to get some national TV coverage coming on Sundays and Mondays and Thursday night games, because as you know right now, the last couple of seasons, Jacksonville's games have been blacked out to regional games because they just haven't had the pull they've had in the past. A guy like this steps in there, and this organization all of a sudden is making hand over fist money because the jersey sales are going to go through the roof. So for a franchise that's kind of limping, as it were, it makes sense.
And if you're a short-term solution general manager and you don't believe in Johnny Manziel as a football player, you may still make that call to get butts in the seats. And you bring up a great point about the television coverage because, yeah, they're in a situation where they're vying for territory in the South with Tampa Bay and with the Atlanta Falcons and the Carolina Panthers, and they get restricted to their very local TV market because those other areas don't want to see the Jacksonville Jaguars play the Tennessee Titans on a Sunday afternoon. They're looking for other games there, and Manziel is going to cause a stir. There's no question about that. All right, Stephen M., the most talked about guy in the draft is, of course, the Heisman Trophy winner. What are your thoughts on Johnny Manziel?
Though Chad makes a great point with the fan revenue and trying to put people in the seats and trying to get jersey sales and trying to raise up the status of the Jacksonville Jaguars, I kind of see Manziel going to Minnesota, honestly. And the reason why I see Manziel going more towards Minnesota, Adrian Peterson needs a quarterback. Christian Ponder hasn't handed out. The Vikings, as of right now, have not decided to use the fifth-year option on Christian Ponder. Yes, they have Matt Castle and Joe Webb, but the Minnesota Vikings need help for Adrian at the core position. They need to find a guy that's going to get Greg Jennings, that's going to get Kyle Rudolph and Cordarrelle Patterson the football. And Johnny Manziel is that ideal guy that can get those receivers, those targets in Minnesota. You talk about he reminds you so much of Fran Tarkenton, Michael Big, of even Brett Favre, in his way of just making plays happen on any given moment. Now, of course, he's going to have to work on his pocket presence a little bit more, but I honestly see Johnny Manziel going to Minnesota. I actually see Jake Matthews going more towards Jacksonville to help out offensive line of the Jaguars, but I see Manziel headed to Minnesota to give AP some help.
All right, if I'm Cleveland sitting at number 4 and Johnny Manziel's still there, I take him. And that goes against every grain in my body that I typically take an approach to the NFL draft because I'm thinking I want a guy that's going to protect the football, that's going to be clean off the field. Obviously, he's got to be a great talent at number 4 if he's playing quarterback. But I have been a detractor of Johnny Manziel since he stepped on the field. He's great to watch. He's fun to watch. I'm going to believe, though, that the Cleveland Browns are a 5-win football team without Johnny Manziel. If he's a bust, they're going to continue to be a 5-win football team. But he has got the X factor, and I believe that even though he could be a bust, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is a bust, there is more chance of Johnny Manziel being a star in the NFL and being a great player, a transcendent player, than Blake Bortles or anybody else in this draft. Chad's telling me, no way, can't do it. And if the Browns want to play it safe and they want to do what's probably the smartest thing to do, they're going to take Sammy Watkins if he's there, or they're going to take the best available player there. Then they got the 26th pick. They're probably going to take a corner or a game changer on the defensive side of the football. Then they still have a deep class of wide receivers and quarterbacks. Maybe they get Derek Carr or Zach Mettenberger on down the line. But I would go for broke. I'd take Manziel. I still got the 26th pick. I still have a deep wide receiver and quarterback class to get somebody else late. Maybe he competes with Aaron Murray because I drafted him in the 4th round. And the Browns have a really good defense as well that not a whole lot of people know about. So my thoughts on Johnny Manziel, I pulled the trigger on that one.
Here's the thing with Cleveland. You mentioned Cleveland. The thing with Cleveland that's interesting is that they made such big moves in free agency this year, and I feel like they were one of the better teams outside of Denver and Oakland that made some really good moves. I just think a guy like Manziel in Cleveland, there you go again, same thing with Jacksonville, you've got butts in the seats. All of a sudden you've got national coverage coming in. I mean, it makes sense, and I think Cleveland, with getting rid of Whedon, I think that they made it clear that they're going after a quarterback.
Well, I think the Browns don't have a concern with putting butts in the seats. They can win 3 football games and they'll still sell out. But in terms of people paying attention to them, you're completely right. They would pay attention to the Cleveland Browns for the first time in forever. Stephen M. is telling me that Cleveland gets Sammy Watkins, and they probably, I'm guessing that would be an exceptional pick considering the Browns are much more prepared in the passing game than they were just like 2 years ago with the tight end they have now and, of course, Josh Gordon. I'm thinking of Jordan Cameron at tight end as well, who had an excellent season for them. Great red zone target. All right, let's get down the board. The Raiders, I've got Taylor Lewan out of Michigan. He's an off-field issue at left tackle. Khalil Mack, who's an interesting player out of Buffalo, who's got everything in the skill set that you need coming off the edge, who made Ohio State and 4 offensive linemen who are at least going to be in NFL camps look really bad in game 1 last season. Then we drop down to number 7 in Tampa Bay, and a guy that you guys both know that I really like, Mike Evans out of Texas A&M. Chad, talk to us about Mike Evans and your thoughts on Evans possibly going to Tampa or wherever you think he might be slotted.
Here's the thing with Evans, and I'm going to be really frank and open about what I think about Evans, because I think Evans is probably one of the more elite receivers. He is, in my opinion, any conversation that mentions Sammy Watkins needs to have Mike Evans' name mentioned in it as well. The guy is an absolute athlete. He can block out the secondary. He knows how to use his body to set himself up between the quarterback and the secondary. I've seen several plays this year. I've got to watch him whenever he played the Razorbacks in Fayetteville, and the ability for him to go up and snatch a ball like an NBA rebounder, over 6 defenders is something that you just don't shake your head at and keep walking. The guy has the ability to be the Megatron 2.0 in the NFL. In my opinion, he's got speed. He's got great burst, great route running, but not only that, he has a great ability and instinct to know where the quarterback is on the field and be able to keep his eye on that quarterback and make a play. That's something that is instinctive. That's something you don't coach. That's something that he has learned how to do. And with having a guy like Johnny Manziel, think about how much he's had to run around on the field. The guy, we could probably put one of those Nike meters in his shoe to see how many miles he runs in a game just to keep track of where Manziel's at. And I promise you, he's a marathon runner. So, in my opinion, I think he's a big get. I would be shocked, honestly. Pick 7 is great. Tampa Bay needs a guy like this with Lovey down there. Lovey's going to build up the defense. I look at a guy like this as somebody that can really add some explosiveness to that offense for Tampa Bay. They need that. This, again, also helps Tampa Bay become relative nationally because you get a big-time player down there. People are going to want to see what he does in the NFL. It's also going to get a lot of spark for the fan base themselves. I like this pick. Honestly, if he slides down to 7, I'm not going to be shocked, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if he went sooner than 7.
Hey, Chad, like you, Mike Evans, I think, is a great player, or could be in the NFL. The tangibles knocked him down at the combine. He's not extremely fast. He's considered a poor route runner, but I think route running in the NFL these days is a little bit overrated. He does exactly what you just said. Just like, obviously, the test has been in college with Johnny Manziel. He can find the open spot, and the guy knows how to play off of defenders, fight them for the football, and he's got all the tricks in his back pocket in terms of being able to high point the football and fight off the defender. And I don't know why Watkins, and this is not to take away from Sammy Watkins, I don't know why he has separated himself that much from the rest of the field of a really good class of wide receivers. So Stephen M., Mike Evans, Texas A&M.
I honestly see Mike Evans going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at that 7th pick, and it's because of his ability to create separation. Not many receivers can fight off with physical corners, but with Mike Evans at 6'5", 220 pounds plus, he can fight off jams at the line of scrimmage, create that separation. He's able to get downfield. He's able to make those clutch catches in the air over defenders in coverage. He has a knack for where the ball is, where the first down marker is, and just how to make big plays. And for Tampa Bay Buccaneers, yes, they have Vincent Jackson down there. They also have a good base second in their defensive core. But when you talk about a game-changing receiver that can help out your quarterback, i.e. for Tampa Bay, Mike Glennon, then Mike Evans is going to be the person that Tampa Bay needs to get. He's a game changer. He high points the football well. He snatches the ball out of the air. He's a decent route runner. He has 4.56 speed in the 40-yard dash. Mike Evans to Tampa Bay, good move. And also, as you guys mentioned, for revenue, I like Mike Evans at Tampa Bay. And Bay, I don't even see Mike Evans in Detroit if the Detroit Tigers can land him there at the 10th overall pick.
Okay, at number 8, we've got Minnesota. This mock draft has Blake Bortles out of Central Florida, a guy that I saw play twice in the last 2 bowl games, upset Louisville 35-31 in a showdown with Teddy Bridgewater. Blake Bortles, when I see Blake Bortles, and when I saw him play those 2 bowl games, I, of course, knew he was going to play in the NFL, but I never imagined that this guy was going to be considered a top 5 quarterback, a top 5 pick, a number 1 quarterback. But most people have him rated ahead of Johnny Manziel, have him number 1. I don't think he's a difference maker. I think he's Matt Schaub. I think that's who he is. I think he's, stands tall at 6'3", 6'4". He's got a better than average arm, not an all-time great arm, but a strong arm. He can make the throws on the field. He's mobile. People don't think he's necessarily fast or mobile, but he's pretty mobile. I think he's going to be a decent NFL quarterback. I know that Stephen M. likes Johnny Manziel going down to number 8 with Minnesota. Bortles, it's interesting because like Chad mentioned before we got on here and some of the opinions on Johnny Manziel, obviously they range from way up here to down here, where Bortles, everybody's got him as a top 10 player in this NFL draft. It's pretty consistent, the scouting report on Blake Bortles. Chad, your thoughts on Bortles, and then we'll get to Jake Matthews.
Man, I like Bortles. I'm like you. I don't know. I don't know enough to say that. I think this guy is going to be the next big thing to step into the NFL. Guys that come out of, it's not against the guys that come out of smaller schools, because we've seen guys like Matty Ice and some of the other guys that have come out in years past where they came out and were able to, they weren't the big name quarterbacks, but they came out and got in the NFL and they did really well. He reminds me a lot. He has that type of frame as some of these guys. I think he has the ability to be a great passer. Mobility in the NFL isn't exactly the biggest issue anymore, because a lot of times in the NFL we still see that pro style set where the guy's taking the snap at shotgun or under center. But for me, Bortles is a guy that I could see him going in the first round, top 10 pick, but I don't know that he's somebody that I would draft confidently if I had other needs. Let me say that. If I had other needs, I would address those first to see what was, and pick up someone else.
Yeah, I just think it's a much better value play to take Zach Mettenberger in the 3rd round versus taking Blake Bortles in the top 10 selections of the NFL draft. All right, Buffalo selecting at number 9 with Jake Matthews out of Texas A&M. Obviously, Texas A&M's got kind of this merry-go-round going where they move guys into right tackle, then they take over for an NFL left tackle, and they move to left tackle their final season at Texas A&M. This is the 3rd consecutive player looking at Jake Matthews. In comparing him to Greg Robinson, to me, better technician, obviously had many more reps dropping back into pass protection from the left tackle position than Greg Robinson, but maybe not as athletically gifted as Robinson. But Jake Matthews will be definitely, I can't imagine, not a solid left tackle in the NFL. And if he goes to the right team, will probably start as a right tackle in the pros. So any thoughts about Jake Matthews from A&M?
I think that with Jake Matthews, it makes sense. They really need to upgrade their protection there in Atlanta. So I think that Jake Matthews, in my opinion, could end up going to Atlanta. Because Matt Ryan needs somebody to keep him healthy, because he got beat up last season. So I'm looking at a guy like Jake Matthews, in my opinion, that can actually end up going to Atlanta. I think that he exhibits a lot of the same attributes that Robinson has, as far as being athletic and being able to get off the ball. You have to be able to work in that type of offense. Again, in my opinion, I don't think he slides that far, Mark. I think Jake Matthews actually probably gets picked up in the top 5. I don't see him making it down that far. This guy, he's solid. He had the opportunity to come out last year, and he didn't. If he would have come out last year, he probably could have been a first-round pick. So I think that, in my opinion, this guy, he's a big get if you have an offensive tackle need.
Stephen M., Jake Matthews, any thoughts on him?
When you look at Jake Matthews, Mark, you talk about high IQ, understands blocking schemes, whether it be run blocking and pass blocking. I have him going to Buffalo to protect E.J. Manuel, quarterback E.J. Manuel didn't play the entire regular season last year, had some injuries there, and the Buffalo Bills had to go with Thad Lewis. But when you look at Jake Matthews, not a speed guy, but he's not on the speed. As I mentioned with Greg Robinson, Jake Matthews can block at the point of attack, can get to the next level, take on a linebacker, really does a great job of shielding defensive linemen from the quarterback, does a great job of opening up holes in the running game, whether it's straight up opening up holes or throwing kick-out blocks or even coming around to pull to get a block on a linebacker to create running lanes in the run game. Like Jake Matthews going to the Buffalo Bills for the simple reason of he's a great pass blocker, but also he's versatile in run blocking, whether it be straight up, taking on defensive linemen, getting after the linebackers, or even pulling around, throwing kick-out blocks to set the edge. So I like Jake Matthews going to the Buffalo Bills for those two reasons.
All right, I'd like to remind everybody that this is SEC in 60, full 60 minutes of SEC football talk every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern and noon Central. We're joined by Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. That's touchdownalabama.net. And also, of course, our co-host here, Chad Neipling of SEC Sports Insider. So catch him there. Follow us all on Twitter. I'm Mark Rogers of Mark Rogers TV as we run down the big board and the NFL draft, specifically looking at those SEC players, which should, again, dominate the first round of the NFL draft again in 2014. You got Darqueze Dennard of Michigan State, a corner that could be drafted in there. Aaron Donald, defensive end out of Pitt, also a big-time player there as we drop down to the Rams at number 13, and a guy that I know Stephen M. is just itching to talk about that the Rams could get at 13, and that's Clinton-Dix.
Clinton-Dix works for St. Louis. And I'm going to tell you why. He's not a burner. He ran a 4.58 at the combine. When you talk about Clinton-Dix, it's instincts, ball skills, coverage, and also his ability to walk down in the box and lower the hits on running backs. When you talk about most say either specialize in just the run game or they specialize in just the pass. Under head coach Nick Saban specializes in both areas. He can play the run well, but he can also play the pass well and taking away an opponent's best receiver. My issue with Clinton-Dix is that he's sometimes over-aggressive and tends to maybe run himself out of the play at times. And also, if he's expected to play more man-to-man on a team that he's with in the National Football League, can he keep up with these speedy, big-time receivers? But my overall synopsis of Clinton-Dix, he's a hard-hitting safety. He can play the pass well, can really high point the ball, be physical with receivers, and in the run game, he can lay the wood on running backs. I honestly see Clinton-Dix going to the Rams. He makes a good fit there in St. Louis. And if not the Rams, the Detroit Tigers and the Minnesota Vikings as well need defensive backs. But if the Rams have a shot at him, Jeff Fisher is a defensive-minded guy. I love him going to St. Louis.
Stephen M. with those Tigers, Lions, and Bears mix up there, I think, a little bit in the Motor City. All right, I'm going to stop here with the Bears because they obviously could take Clinton-Dix if he jumps down. But I'm going to let Chad jump in here on the Bears. It's his baby. It's his team from the NFC North. Chad, who do you like the Bears taking here?
You know, I really like Aaron Donald out of Pittsburgh. I really do like him. I think that guy, he makes sense. You know, I've gotten so accustomed to love his defense that's something that I love, and that's one thing I love about the SEC. It's the reason why they both kind of fall in line for me. I just really like defense, and with Mark Trestman in there, I'm kind of questioning some of his decisions that he's made. So I see them going. They have to meet some defensive needs in this draft. We have some guys that are aging. We've seen that. You know, they go out and they pick up Jared out of Minnesota. They signed him after getting rid of Peppers. Peppers, you know, one of the things that they looked at was his age. And, well, you know, he got double teamed most of last season, so he's still a great athlete, but he just didn't produce. You know, we've got a lot. You know, they signed Tillman to a one-year contract. So there's a lot of needs on defense, and Chicago needs to address that. They've got some playmakers on offense. Not very consistent at quarterback play, which they haven't been in a long time. So for me, I really want to see them address some defensive needs. Some people have been picking up Calvin Pryor out of Louisville as a free safety. That's something we definitely need help in, is to replenish that secondary, because once Tillman's done this year, I don't know if they'll renew his contract or not. And I love the strip and take away defense of that secondary. That's something that it gets me really energetic, and not to see that anymore is going to be sad if they lose Tillman. But I'd like a guy like Aaron Donald out of Pittsburgh, defensive tackle there. They're saying that he possibly could go to New York, but I think if he slides down, you've got three guys right there in a row: Donald, Clinton-Dix, and Calvin Pryor, that possibly could end up wearing Bears hats on draft day.
Yeah, Tillman with a nose for the football, almost unlike anybody we've seen in recent years in the NFL. And like you make a good point on Julius Peppers, still could be a productive player. If he's single-teamed, he still gets that respect. They obviously just couldn't cash in on that kind of money for an aging player at his level. You got a lot of high-profile teams selecting here in the middle of the first round, with the Bears at 14, the Steelers at 15, the Cowboys at 16, the Ravens, who won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, at 17, the Jets at 18. A lot of guys projected to go in this realm. Pryor, you mentioned the safety out of Louisville, Chad. Zach Martin, offensive tackle, Notre Dame. Eric Ebron, who's an interesting player who could be that Jimmy Graham kind of player coming out of North Carolina. Brandon Cooks, possibly one of those more undervalued wide receivers, and the Jets. It would probably kill Rex Ryan, but he probably should be taking an offensive player at 18. Stephen M., maybe the next player that comes off the board here from the SEC could be your guy C.J. Mosley out of Alabama.
When you look at C.J. Mosley, I see three teams en route of C.J. Mosley, that being the Tennessee Titans, or two teams, excuse me, the Tennessee Titans and the Dallas Cowboys. When you talk about C.J. Mosley, he's an instinctive linebacker who knows how to shoot the gaps. He's a great run stopper. Pass rushing, it will be an issue, but I feel like it depends on the team he goes to, where the pass rushing is. His size is always a question at 6'2", 234 pounds, but I think if he plays outside linebacker, that will not be a big issue. My biggest thing with C.J. Mosley is, can he defend the running backs coming out of the backfield on wheel routes? He was burned on that a lot in his career at Alabama. So can he defend that? Can he continue to defend slot receivers and tight ends coming on slant routes and drag routes to the middle of the field? But as far as his IQ and instinct on how to shoot the gap, create tackles in space, hit the running backs hard, and just play the passing lanes with his lateral, sideline-to-sideline quickness, I love C.J. Mosley in that regard. And I can honestly see him either going to Tennessee, who needs a middle linebacker, or the Dallas Cowboys that need defense, period. But knowing Jerry Jones, he's the most unpredictable owner in the game today. You don't know what Jerry Jones is going to do. But I see C.J. Mosley either falling to Dallas or Tennessee in his way of being lateral sideline quickness, his instinct, his ability to get after the run, and also to play the passing lane.
Yeah, I don't know if Jerry Jones is predictable or unpredictable. It's predictable that he's going to get way too involved and knock his football people off the board and make decisions himself. He took a center out of, can't remember the kid's name, but a center out of Wisconsin at the end of the first round last year that was a huge reach. The kid actually started as a rookie for the Cowboys and played very well, but still it was a reach, a kid that they could have gotten 30 picks later and they could have made another pick there. But it turned out to be a good player pick, but it was a reach and not the pick they needed to make. And, of course, Dallas is all about gaining weapons on offense, but, yeah, need to go with the defense. I would totally agree with you there. Any thoughts on C.J. Mosley? Because, Chad, the way Stephen M. sets it up with Mosley, it's going to be difficult for him to sustain a career in the NFL if he's not able to play that passing game and pick up some guys in coverage.
That was, we were messaging each other there while he was talking, and that was one of the points I brought up, was that, for me, in the NFL, a running back has to be able to come out of the backfield to catch the ball. That passing game is integral, is an integral part of the NFL. And for Mosley, that's going to be something he's going to have to really work on. Now, here's the thing with Mosley. We know he's a heck of an athlete. We know he's got a nose for the ball. He gets around the right coaches that teach him how to go about that correctly. I see no problem. And that's the thing, is there's so much upside to Mosley that is really kind of minimal in my opinion. I think that's something that they could really, hone in on with his athleticism. I'll be straight up with you. I would love it. He's another guy. I would love if Chicago snatched him up. We need a linebacker, something fierce, and I would love to have that guy. And I think a lot of teams would if he's going to go in the first round. Granted, if he slides down this far, that's kind of, it doesn't say anything about him. He's just a heck of a linebacker. Dallas, I love your talk, Steven. You hit the nail on the head. They need defense, period. And a guy like this, I hate to say it, a guy like this, man, would get snowed under in that defensive team because of the fact that they need so many different weapons on defense that a guy like Mosley would probably get snowed under in that situation.
Yeah, if they don't have the defensive front to keep players off of him, it's going to be difficult for him to make plays even in the running game. Yeah, as I look at the board that I've got, just carving through some players before we get to our next SEC guy. Derek Carr's an interesting player out of Fresno State, of course. A lot of people consider him to be undervalued. Threw for a ton of yardage, of course, has the pedigree with his brother, a #1 pick. People hoping that Derek Carr is not going to be the next David Carr. Ryan Shazier out of Ohio State, possibly going to the Packers. They really like him. One of my favorite players in the last 5 years, Ryan Shazier. Kelvin Benjamin, who got the game-winning touchdown in the BCS Championship, is a huge wide receiver, big, strong guy. Make all sorts of comparisons going back to possibly David Boston there. You've got Marquise Lee, who's fluid, who's slick. His stock plummeted because of the lack of production in that offense as a senior, or a junior, I should say. Had a ridiculous sophomore season with like 115 catches and 1,800 yards and a zillion touchdowns when Matt Barkley was pulling the trigger, and he had Robert Woods on the other side drawing some attention, so Marquise Lee could go to Kansas City. The next SEC player I've got on my board, gentlemen, is Coney Ely out of Missouri, defensive end. Chad, your thoughts on Ely?
I like the guy a lot. Ely right now, for me, has he should probably be your #2 if you're looking at defensive ends in the draft. He should be your #2. Clowney being 1, obviously, because of what he's getting notoriety-wise, but and then follow him up with D. Ford out of Auburn, probably at the #4 spot. But Ely offers you a guy that's 270-plus pounds, 6'4", behemoth of a guy. He's athletic, got length. He is what you would think of in a defensive end in the NFL. He embodies that physically, and I think his play makes up for it too. He was a guy that, in all honesty, pretty much went unnoticed because of guys like Michael Sam and how the offensive went in Missouri. Ely is probably, if we want to look at it SEC-wise, is probably one of the most underrated players coming out, just because of the fact that he hasn't gotten the national recognition that some of these other guys have gotten in the past. Ely, man, I really like this guy. As a matter of fact, I got him and Michael Sam's autograph back here in this helmet. I really like those two guys a lot. I think that what they bring to the table could really help out a defense. And if I'm looking right now and I need a defensive end, and he's still on the board, he's the guy I'm going after.
I messed up here. I had a guy much higher than any of these guys that I missed on my big board. Stephen M., if you want to jump in on, I think you'd like to talk about this guy, Odell Beckham Jr. out of LSU, who might go to the Lions possibly.
If the Lions pull this, Mark, oh baby. You're talking about Calvin Megatron Johnson and Odell Beckham Jr. with one football. That would be a joy for quarterback Matthew Stafford. You're talking about Odell Beckham Jr. out of LSU. 6'3", great hands, good top speed, can high point the football, knows how to create separation. But the thing I love about him is he's a smooth route runner. He runs his mouth. He runs his routes crisp. He knows how to plant that cleat in the ground, turn with agility, get the football, but his yards after the catch, his ability to break tackles, make people miss, be elusive, and get quickly upfield. Odell Beckham Jr. is a stud. He understands how to, like I said, create separation from defenders, go up, high point the football. He runs with the quarterback. He builds a great rapport with quarterbacks. I love Odell Beckham Jr.
What do you say, Chad?
I mean, for me, Beckham Jr., I'm with him. If Detroit makes this move, man, watch out. I mean, that is a lethal receiving core. Beckham Jr., in my opinion, is one of the top receivers as well, and we see that he's going at 15. I do think there's a drop-off, though, after you get past Evans a little bit, and I think Beckham Jr. is the guy that makes sense. Some people have him going to the Steelers. I think it makes sense for the Steelers. They need somebody out there on the outside that's a playmaker. But I'll be quite honest with you, I think the Steelers have other issues they need to address before they address a wide receiver. Beckham could go to several places that would make sense. I mean, if he fell as far as 18 to get picked up by the Jets, that's another guy that, he could make a big play for the Jets. In my opinion, he's an extremely fanatical athlete. We've been able to see how he made passes, made plays in LSU. He's not the fastest wideout that you've seen that was in the combine, but that doesn't matter whenever you can make space on a play and you run great routes.
I think the first thought about the Lions is that they don't need more offense, but if you really look at it below the surface, they really do, because past Calvin Johnson, they had Nate Burleson as their number 2 receiver. He's moved on. They went with, I can't think of the Georgia kid who wasn't even drafted, became their number 2 receiver that used to hook up a lot with Aaron Murray. Can't think of the kid's name off the top of my head, but he ended up being their number 2 receiver the back half of last season. What's that?
Was that Michael Bennett?
No, it wasn't Michael Bennett. Anyway, it'll come to me at some point.
Tavares King.
What's that?
Was it Tavares King?
No, it wasn't Tavares King. Yeah. It's a little white kid that didn't get drafted, was actually their number 2 receiver like the last 5 games of last year after Burleson got hurt. Anyway, they need somebody to complement Calvin Johnson in the passing game, and Detroit needs back 7 help. They've got the front line on defense, as we well know, but they need, if there was a corner or a linebacker worth taking at that point and Beckham's gone, Darqueze Dennard out of Michigan State could be a guy that they look at, and also Clinton-Dix as well. Could be a possible pick for them. They're a mess in the secondary, the Detroit Lions. All right, I've got Anthony Barr out of UCLA. I think he's a good value if he drops to 25-26. Fuller, of the many Fullers that come out of Virginia Tech, it seems like every 3 years they've got another Fuller that's a corner wide receiver coming out of Virginia Tech. The Browns really like him. This board that I picked off of has Cody Latimer out of Indiana going to the Saints. Saints, don't draft him. Don't have anything against the kid, but he's a 2nd or 3rd round pick. He's not a 1st round pick, and the Saints should not be drafting. Unlike the Lions, their reputation holds true here. I think they need help elsewhere. Morgan Moses, another kid that's on the draft board late in the 1st round, a tackle out of Virginia. I would think off the top of my head that Virginia and North Carolina produce more NFL players for having bad football programs than anybody in the country. I don't know what it says about their coaching. Not so much North Carolina. They do win some football games, but Virginia, for winning 3 and 4 football games every year, produce NFL players for some reason. Rashid Hageman, who's an exceptional talent out of Minnesota, is liked by the Patriots. Now I get to the next SEC guy, and that would be, this could be a bit of a reach. I know he was extremely productive in college, and he had little help on the other side of the field taking coverage away from him, but Jordan Matthews from Vanderbilt, I've got a mock draft here that has him going to San Francisco at 30. What do you think about that, Chad?
Man, that would be a big get for San Francisco, in my opinion. San Francisco, and I agree with you, it's a bit of a reach, but you got to think Jordan Matthews did the impossible at Vanderbilt, setting the passing record. I mean, being able to catch that many receptions at Vanderbilt says a lot about a kid. For me, 49ers, I've been told, have been talking about reaching out for somebody on offense, wide receiver. Crabtree's probably not going to be there after another year. He's been injury-ridden, since he's been there. In order for them to stay relative in the West out there, especially with a team like Seattle, with such a dangerous secondary and that defense being as tight as it is, you're going to have some playmakers on the outside. And I could definitely see that. Some people have even said that, at 30, San Francisco picks up Jason Barrett, which is the cornerback out of TCU. But I really think that San Francisco needs to address two things: the secondary on defense, and two, they need to address their wideouts and get some playmakers, because we know their run game is going to be great. We know that the quarterback play is going to be great. If Jordan Matthews ends up in a San Francisco 49ers jersey after the first day of the draft, that's awesome. In my opinion, that's a big get for San Francisco.
All right, Stephen M. Jordan Matthews, like Chad alluded to, 112 receptions, SEC record, all-time SEC reception leader. Goes without saying, very productive at Vanderbilt, especially considering not much help on the other side of the field. Your thoughts about Jordan Matthews?
Chad says it may be a reach mark. To me, it's not. You look at San Francisco, they're built on Colin Kaepernick, zone read option. They're built on Colin Kaepernick rolling out, finding receivers open downfield. Kaepernick has a good arm. Vernon Davis is getting older. Of course, as Chad mentioned, Michael Crabtree may not be there that long. And then Anquan Bolden not getting any younger. He's getting older himself. You need another receiver, and Jordan Matthews is going to be that next big target to help out with the passing game of Colin Kaepernick and the San Francisco 49ers. They love to air the ball out. And like I mentioned, with Anquan Bolden, Vernon Davis getting older, you need some young blood. You need some California young blood in San Francisco. And what better than an SC guy like Jordan Matthews to go out there and make plays for your offense? So I agree with that pick. I love Jordan Matthews in San Francisco. Physical receiver, great route runner, understands how to go up there, make receptions, create separation. And I feel like, as I mentioned, with aging receivers, Davis and Anquan Bolden, a good find in Jordan Matthews for San.
Okay, I'm not saying I wouldn't take Jordan Matthews at some point in the draft and that he won't be a productive, not just a slot receiver. That's confining him. He can play on the outside and make receptions, and I would expect him to be a 50, 60 catch guy in the NFL at some point, but I wouldn't take Jordan Matthews in the first round. I think that's way too high. All right, let's run down the rest of the list. So these are guys that most likely won't make it into the first round. Could be second, could be third rounders, but could turn out to be very productive players. I think you guys well know that if anybody's drafted in the top 3 rounds, generally they need to be starting in the NFL at some point within 3 years is generally a good projection for those guys, whether it be a boom or a bust. And let's start with Alabama's offensive tackle, Cyrus Kouandjio. Stephen M., your thoughts on Cyrus Kouandjio?
My thoughts with Cyrus Kouandjio, he has the potential to be a dominant offensive lineman, 6'7", 325 pounds. My thing is with Kouandjio is, can he be more alert and can he be consistent? We saw at the NFL Combine, 40 time was slow, vertical jump was slow. Now, that was due because of a knee injury, but his pro day, he really improved. 40 time improved, and the vertical jump improved to 31 inches. But with Kouandjio, it's the fact that can he be alert and recognize the quarterback's cadence? You saw half of the penalties on Alabama's offensive line last season came via Kouandjio with false starts. Can he block out the crowd noise, be more alert, understand the quarterback's cadence, and block at the point of attack? You saw last year Kouandjio had the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde effect. When he played against teams with low-class talent, he was able to bully those teams, explode off the ball, block the point of attack, protect A.J. McCarron, and also open up holes in the run game. But when he played against high-class talent at LSU, at Virginia Tech, at Oklahoma, and at Auburn, Kouandjio struggled, especially against D4 and Striker at Oklahoma, Quanjo struggled getting off the ball. He was beat at the line of scrimmage, and he was slow. The leg drive was slow. Quanjo's going to have to get more consistent with the leg drive, bursting off the ball, blocking at the point of attack, setting the edge, and shielding defensive linemen away from the quarterback. As far as being a run blocker, Quanjo excels in blocking the run. He can get over and throw those kick-out blocks to set the edge in the run game. But Quanjo's needs to improve on is his consistency and his alertness at the line of scrimmage and reading the quarterback's cadence. I can actually see the Miami Dolphins picking up Cyrus Quanjo because they need somebody to protect the blind side of Ryan Tannehill.
Hey, Chad, unless you've got something on Cyrus Quanjo, I wanted to move on to Gabe Jackson out of Mississippi State. And like a lot of these guys who typically move to tackle because they're the best offensive lineman on the team, Gabe Jackson has been pretty much entrenched as a guard at Mississippi State. Any thoughts on Gabe Jackson before we move on to D Ford and A.J. McCarron?
You know, Gabe is probably going to be one of the more underrated players we see coming out of the SEC this year as well. Great lineman. Has the ability to be a good player on the next level. To add to Cyrus, there's some people saying that he may go in the first round with in Carolina to protect Cam Newton. I agree with a lot of what Steven said. Jackson, to me, some people will say that he's still in the conversation for the first round and could possibly go in the top 32. Detroit, Philadelphia, I've been looking at him. Those guys were there at his pro day at Mississippi State. It was held indoors on field turf, but that, nonetheless, he still performed very well. I really think that Gabe has the ability to be a solid next-level player.
As we get down a little bit deeper into the draft, we're probably at the 30 to 35 to 40 range. Why don't we group these quarterbacks together and talk quarterbacks right now, because we're getting to the point where A.J. McCarron could possibly come off the board. Everybody's got thoughts on A.J. McCarron. Is he a winner that's going to translate to the NFL, or is he a skinny kid that can't make all the throws, that's going to get beat up? He doesn't have mobility. He's going to be a decent backup quarterback. Lots of thoughts on A.J. McCarron. We got A.J. McCarron. We've got, of course, Zach Mettenberger, who had a really breakout senior season statistically with the two great wide receivers at LSU after throwing just 12 touchdowns the season before. You've got Aaron Murray coming off the bad knee injury, who's the most prolific passer in SEC history coming out of Georgia. What I was impressed with regarding Murray was all his weapons were stripped away from him last season, and he still found a way with some walk-ons, with some third stringers. They had a senior in particular, can't come up with his name, who hadn't seen the field his entire career, who was a main target in that offense by the time we got to Game 8, Game 9, and Aaron Murray really showed his leadership skills at Georgia. And so basically we've got Murray, we got Mettenberger, we got McCarron, and the jury's out on those three and whether they're separated at all. And you also can't forget about, of course, Connor Shaw at South Carolina, a guy that took care of the football so well when it speaks to 24 touchdowns thrown and 1 pick this past season. So, Chad, give us your rundown on the quarterbacks and your thoughts about who may separate himself from that group.
Right now, me and Steven were talking about this before the show started, and right now, McCarron had been getting a lot of pub here previously, but in the last week or so, Aaron Murray his stock has really risen as of late. He's a quarterback that I think could definitely be a next level guy that goes unrated going into the draft, but he comes out in the NFL and actually is able to do something. Him and McCarron both, I feel like if they can get into a system where they have a year to get acclimated to the NFL, they potentially have the ability to be guys that can step up and play. Another guy I really like is Mettenberger. And Mettenberger is another guy that's kind of went under the radar a lot too, but you got to think about Mettenberger. He came out of Cam Cameron's system. Cam Cameron ran that NFL-style system. He, in my opinion, out of the guys that I just mentioned, is probably a little more prepared in the sense of what he's going to see in the film room, and that's going to go a long way with his acclimation to the NFL. I know a lot of people like to question his injury, But the truth of the matter is, look at the difference between last year's season and the 2012 season when Cam Cameron stepped in with this kid and had a full offseason to work with him. Think about what he can do when he goes in and starts doing 2-a-days and gets into his training camps and actually gets in around an NFL staff. I mean, I really think he has the potential to be a big-time player on the next level. Granted, in the NFL, the quarterback position is probably one of the most overzealous and sometimes one of the most overrated positions, just depending on how much media hype there is around you. So any one of those three guys, I really think in the next 2 to 3 seasons would have the ability to step up and be a name that we're hearing regularly on Sundays.
All right, Stephen M., we've got Murray, Mettenberger, and McCarron. They don't seem to have separated themselves. They seem to be grouped together in regards to at what point they're going to be drafted. They've got similar skill sets because none of them are running quarterbacks. Then you throw in Connor Shaw, who brings that ability, but he's much further down the line in regards to the scouts' projections, doesn't have the arm strength. Your thoughts about this quarterback class?
I really love this SEC quarterback class, Mark. And another guy you can throw in there is Missouri's James Franklin, who is also in this draft as well. When you talk about these SEC quarterbacks, I'll start with A.J. McCarron. The one thing with A.J. McCarron, we know the stats. The guy passed for 9,019 yards, 77 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, and he has the hardware to show for it. But I think with A.J. McCarron, he's accurate. He knows how to place the ball in the right spots. His deep ball and back shoulder throws really improved from 2011 to last season. Really showed scouts in the NFL Combine that he does have that arm strength. He recognizes the personnel that he has on the field well. My thing is with A.J. McCarron is, can he anticipate the blitz at the next level? Because when you have offensive linemen like Barrett Jones, DJ Fluker, Chance Warmack in years past that really bought into the system and protected your backs and you were not blitzed a lot, you saw what happened last season where the guys like Jones and Warmack and DJ Fluker were in the NFL, and though you had guys like Cyrus Kwanjo, Ari Kwanjo, Anthony Steen and Ryan Kelly, they didn't carry the same mantra that Jones, Fluker, and Warmack had. And because they didn't carry that same mantra, A.J. McCarron was sacked a lot. Alabama's offensive line gave up 17 sacks. McCarron held the ball too long for much of those games during those sacks. So can McCarron anticipate the blitz well and get the ball out to his quick hot read is going to be an issue. Number two, A.J. McCarron tends to force passes sometimes. I remember the Colorado State game. Alabama was up 31-6, not 31-6, 24-6 against Colorado State, and A.J. McCarron tried to force the pass downfield to Kenny Bell when Kenny Bell was well covered. A.J. McCarron has to understand that if my first option isn't there, I got to continue to go through my progressions, check the ball down, or get the ball out of bounds to preserve a possession. When you look at Zach Mettenberger and Aaron Murray, Chad hit the nail on the head with Zach Mettenberger. Cam Cameron came in and really matured this man as a quarterback. Zach Mettenberger has good arm strength, not the most mobile guy in the world, but he can step up in the pocket when he feels the rush coming and get the ball downfield. He has a great sense of knowing where his hot read receivers are. He can get the ball out to them quickly. He has the tools to take to the game of checking down his progressions, getting the ball out quickly with a quick release, and understanding where to go to with the football. You look at Aaron Murray, one of the more prolific passers in the SEC, great arm strength. He does show some mobility, but those intangibles, his leadership, his ability to will his team is what I love the most about Aaron Murray. And then with Connor Shaw, his mobility, but he is a good passer. People do not give him as much credit as he should be given, but Connor Shaw is a bona fide great SEC passer, can spread the ball to a variety of receivers. But like I said, going back to the two guys, A.J. McCarron, and Zach Mettenberger, I really feel like Mettenberger goes to the New England Patriots because you look at Tom Brady and Zach Mettenberger, they almost mirror each other. Both guys aren't mobile, but both guys have an arm strength. They recognize the personnel, and they make smart decisions with the football. As for A.J. McCarron, I see him going either towards New England, if not New England, Arizona, Green Bay, or New Orleans, those teams that have those strong front offices, great coaches, and the receiving core talent as well as the offensive line to back them up.
Okay, I don't think there's any question. This is the most prolific quarterback class that's ever come out of the SEC. When you're talking about the all-time winningest quarterback, you're talking about the all-time winningest quarterback at his school, Connor Shaw. You're talking about the most prolific in yards and touchdowns, and Aaron Murray. James Franklin, we mentioned him as well, who had a good run in Missouri and taking them to the SEC championship game. So I think Mettenberger is going to turn out to be the best quarterback in the NFL out of that group. Again, I think Johnny Manziel has a chance to be a great player. And I wouldn't have said that a few months ago necessarily. He's going to have to take care of the football a little bit better and obviously stay on the field. All right, I believe that we've got a great wide receiver class. I love this wide receiver class top to bottom, not just the guys in the SEC, but beyond that. I think it's an exceptional wide receiver class. So we've talked about Beckham, we've talked about Evans in particular, and also Jordan Matthews out of Vanderbilt. I like to group some of these other wide receivers because we've got Bruce Ellington out of South Carolina. We've got Jarvis Landry, who teamed with Beckham at LSU. Dante Moncrief out of Ole Miss. All sorts of really good wide receivers. Kevin Norwood's getting some attention out of Alabama, caught 7 touchdowns last season. Am I missing anybody here? LaDainian Washington out of Missouri, even though DGB, Dorial Green Beckham, was the freak of an athlete. Washington very productive at Missouri as well. So, Chad, man, this wide receiver class is very strong.
I'll tell you, man, out of those guys you just listed, I really like 2 in particular, Ellington and Washington. 2 of those guys I really like a lot. I think Washington, in my opinion, Washington was the guy that actually emerged from Missouri as one of their top receivers last season. DGB had started to kind of get that way towards the midway to the end of the season. I think DGB picked up about 800-plus yards, but Washington really kind of blew it out for Missouri. He was one of their go-to guys. He's got a lot of speed and height. He's got a lot of length, athletic. I think he's a guy that potentially could be a great NFL receiver on down the line. He's going to get some playing time as a rookie, of course. Ellington is a speedster, a guy that I really like. I think when you think about a football player in general, he kind of embodies that as far as being tough and athletic. He puts his head down, he'll go in, he makes big plays. But then, you've got guys that have emerged from all over the place because the passing game this last year has become so much more prevalent. It gained speed in 2012, but then in 2013 we saw how big the passing game was in the SEC. And you look at guys like Murray and Shaw and James Franklin and Manziel. These guys had to have players to pass to. So you had the emergence of big-time wide receivers come up. And there are some guys we've seen. The SEC was always noted as being a run first and then defensive-oriented conference. But in the last couple of seasons, we've really seen the passing game emerge, and we've seen some big-time playmakers emerge on the outside. And I know Steven's going to pick up on his Alabama guy, and I love him too. I think he's a heck of a playmaker. He really blew it out in the combine, and he also had a great pro day from what I heard. So I like him a lot as well. I just think that you can't go wrong this draft selecting a wide receiver out of the SEC with the playmakers we've got on these rosters that have come out.
All right, Stephen M., wide receiver class.
I'm high on 3 guys from this wide receiver class, Mark. The 3 guys, Jarvis Landry of LSU. I love him. And then you got Damian Washington out of Missouri. And then my 3rd guy, Kevin Norwood from Alabama. My 3 guys. I'm going to start with Kevin Norwood from Alabama.
We're shocked.
Kevin Norwood from Alabama, this is why. In Alabama, when you have so many receivers, when you have Amari Cooper, DeAndrew White, Christian Jones, when you have so many receivers at Alabama, it tends at times for somebody to get thrown under the radar. Kevin Norwood was never really the big topic of conversation, but when it came down to answering the bell and making big-time plays, Kevin Norwood was that guy. I mean, he ended his career with 81 receptions for 1,275 yards and 12 touchdowns. You talk about in games against LSU, especially the 2012 national title game and the 2013 regular season matchup against LSU, Kevin Norwood owned that Tiger secondary. He did a phenomenal job being at the right place at the right time, moving the chains, and getting those clutch catches. What I love about Kevin Norwood was that 2012 title game against LSU, he went from being just another Alabama face to that clutch go-to security blanket for A.J. McCarron. You talk about after the regular season ended, many analysts thought that he would be a sixth-round steal, but Kevin Norwood goes to the Senior Bowl. He had 5 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown. He goes to the NFL Combine, in which people felt like he was just a 4.6 speed guy. He ran a 4.39 unofficial, 4.48 official, really showed elite speed along with great hands, really had a great pro day in Alabama's first and second pro day. Kevin Norwood, in my opinion, is a middle third to late fifth round steal. He's a guy that's a clutch receiver, can go up, make receptions for you, can move the chains on third downs. My issue with Kevin Norwood, he sometimes has problems creating separation at the line of scrimmage, and we didn't see a lot of him breaking tackles and getting yards after the catch. But as far as being that clutch third down receiver and being that security blanket, love Kevin Norwood. When you look at Damian Washington from Missouri, as Chad put it beautifully, he was that guy that didn't get as much as media attention as Dorial Green Beckham, but a playmaker. Damian Washington, speed guy, knows where the football is, knows how to go up, fight defensive backs to get the football. Unlike Kevin Norwood, Damian Washington can create separation, can get to the inside, and not only that, has the speed to burn a safety and a corner deep down the field, can get to the middle of the field. Washington can make the catch in traffic, can make the hit while making the catch in traffic. And when you look at Jarvis Landry, didn't get a lot of the hype as Odell Beckham Jr. gets, but Jarvis Landry, 4.65 in the 40-yard dash. Not a burner guy, but an elite route runner. Somebody, once again, that can create separation, high point the football at the point of attack, builds a great rapport with quarterbacks. So my 3, love Jarvis Landry, Damian Washington, and for Kevin Norwood, clutch receiver. If he can work on his blocking at the point of attack a little bit better, blocking for the running backs and blocking for other receivers, and just being able to create that separation a bit more, Kevin Norwood is going to be a steal in the NFL because of his ability to find the third down marker, pick up, move the chains, and just be that security blanket.
By the way, Chris Durham is the wide receiver from Georgia I was trying to think of that's now with the Detroit Lions. Caught 38 last year, 2 touchdowns for the Lions opposite Calvin Johnson. All right, why don't we just stay with the Glamour Boys? So we've run down the quarterback class, the wide receiver class. Let's go with the running backs here. And before we get to the true tailback position, we got to give some props. Now, if this was the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the day of Rocky Bleier, Robert Newhouse, and Tom Rathman, and those guys in the NFL where everybody needed a fullback that was going to pave the way for a running back that was going to carry the ball 300 times, then the value on guys like Auburn's Jay Prosh and Kiero Small of Arkansas and J.C. Copeland of LSU and those kind of guys would be sky high. But unfortunately, those guys, while still may get drafted, possibly they obviously have to fit a particular offense. So let's look at the running backs, and it all starts, I believe, with Auburn's Trey Mason, who really showed what he was all about the last 5 or 6 games of last season. You also have Rajon Neal, who probably will be drafted late from Tennessee, who played behind a very good Tennessee offensive line with a couple high picks that we'll discuss here in just a second. but it's Jeremy Hill out of LSU as well, getting a lot of attention, who could sneak into that top 35 or 40 picks, something in that range, and then some projects possibly that we'll see some NFL camp time, and Jeff Scott and James Morgan out of Ole Miss. So when we look at the running back class, who really stands out for you, Chad?
I mean, first you're going to have to look in the SEC. You're going to have to look at a guy like Trey Mason. Trey Mason is a guy that put up a lot of yardage under that Auburn system. My question with Trey Mason is I know he has the quick feet, he has the ability to hit the holes, hit the gaps, and be able to make some great plays. But is he going to be your every down back? Is he going to be a guy that can carry the load consistently? Because we know in the NFL you've got to have two guys. You can't really just have a guy that does it. I think Trey Mason would be a guy that would be great to be able to come in as your number 2 running back if you've already got a starting running back. The 1-2 combination with him at the helm would be very impressive with his ability, with his speed, and he has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, which, as we know, as we discussed a while ago in the NFL, that's big for a running back. Another guy I really like in the running back position is Jeremy Hill. I've been big on him all season. Jeremy Hill, to me, looks like your prototypical NFL running back right now, just by looking at him, how he looked in the games this season. I mean, he's a big load. The guy puts his head down, he gets his shoulder pads down level. I mean, he's a guy that when he hits the hole, somebody's getting trucked, and I love that about him. He's a guy. If I was looking for somebody, he kind of reminds me a lot of Bush for Dallas, Michael Bush when he played with Dallas there, and he has that style to him. He's a guy that I would want to take the majority of my – I would have somebody at number 2 as the running back position, but he's a guy I would want to be able to take the load most of the time, and he'd be my number 1 running back, just based off the fact of his physical attributes alone. And plus, we know he can carry the ball. He has breakneck speed when he gets out in the open. A lot of guys that have that type of size, they don't carry themselves very well when they get out in the open field. They try to get into that next level. And he has that ability. On top of that, there's several other running backs in the SEC that I think that could be quality backs. But when I look at the landscape as a whole going into this draft, those 2, in my opinion, are guys that could probably step on a team right now and start playing right away.
Well, we know the plight of the running back in the NFL. It's been devalued for the first time in forever. We're probably going to have 3 consecutive years where we don't have a running back drafted in the first round because you just can't focus on that one guy and give him the football 30 times like LaDainian Tomlinson, who actually Adrian Peterson, he's probably the last of a breed. We may never see him again in regards to an offense being centered around the running back position and the tailback who sets up 5 to 7 yards deep, and you give him the football time and time again. But at the same time, you need to move the chains, and you need that balance in an offense. So the best offenses in the NFL are still balanced. We saw Seattle still rely on Marshawn Lynch to carry the load and really take pressure off Russell Wilson. So it's still a valued position, and you still need a hammer. And I think Jeremy Hill's that guy. I have him rated slightly above Trey Mason, and probably Carlos Hyde seems to have distinguished himself for some reason as the best running back in the draft. I don't necessarily know that that's the case. I think those 3 guys are extremely close at this point. But Stephen M., your thoughts about Hill and Mason and anybody else you'd like to throw in there, because we've got some fringe prospects, the guys that I mentioned, and also Ladarius Perkins out of Mississippi State.
Well, Mark, I have 3 strong candidates, and I have a sleeper. My 3 strong candidates, we're talking about Jeremy Hill from LSU, Trey Mason, Auburn. We have Jeremy Hill, Trey Mason for Auburn. We have 2 strong candidates in the sleeper. We have Jeremy Hill, Trey Mason of Auburn, and then my sleeper, I have Henry Josie of Missouri. You talk about Trey Mason from Auburn. He was 80% of Auburn's offense ran through rare combination of power and speed, but he's smooth. He's a smooth running back. He hits the hole smooth. He understands how to set up his blocks with his eyes, with the cutback lanes. He has good vision. My thing with Trey Mason is he durable enough. Can he take the hits in the NFL from the linebackers, from the secondary, and even from some of the defensive ends, as Chad mentioned. NFL, you need those two-back systems to kind of spell running backs and keep everybody fresh and healthy on the field. So that's of Les Miles of being that tough hammer running back that runs downhill, that smash mouth running back that will leave you in the dust as well as truck you over, run you over. That's Jeremy Hill. He has speed when he gets to the open field and when he gets to the edge, but in between the tackles, he's that power guy that offenses in the NFL, that offensive coordinators and coaches love, that power runner that's going to get you 3 to 4 to 5 yards of pop, that can get you into those second and short, third and mid situations, and that's what you want, the durable running back. That's what Jeremy Hill is. My sleeper, Henry Josey from Missouri. Henry Josey, believe it or not, has that keen sense of when to shift gears. Henry Josey, when he gets to the open field, you're talking about he hits a second and third gear in a nanosecond. He has the ability to hit that second, third gear. He's very shifty. He's very quick. He has a lot of vision. I saw in the Auburn game a lot where there could be a hole open on the left side. When Henry Josey sees the hole open on the right side, he's quick to bounce it out to that outside with that counter motion and get to the open field. And just that notion to change speeds on a dime. It's remarkable with Henry Josey. So I love Henry Josey as my sleeper guy in the NFL. He may get selected between the 3rd and the 5th round. But my two guys, two dominant prospects, I have Jeremy Hill from LSU and Trey Mason of Auburn.
Okay, the offensive line, we ran down the top 5, what we consider the top 5 offensive linemen coming out of the SEC. We also have the 2 exceptional linemen coming out of Tennessee that always produced a great ground game with Rajon Neal and Jawan James, and also Antonio Richardson. Like to mention 3 tremendous linemen coming out of Georgia in Canarius Gates, and you've got Dallas Lee and Chris Burnett. That's what I've got along the offensive front. We also have Travis Swanson, the center at Arkansas, who will get drafted, no question about that. Any thoughts along the offensive front for either of you guys before we start to nail the defense?
You know, for me, I think a couple guys that really go unspoken so much in this draft are really Antonio Richardson and Jawan James out of Tennessee. These guys, we knew it during the season, no matter how bad Tennessee's been over the past couple of years, they've been able to put out some NFL quality linemen. And these 2 guys have really kind of flown under the radar. Granted, Jawan James has been rated as the 4th best, one of the 4th best offensive tackles coming out in this draft. But that said, there has been a lot of great offensive players that are coming out. Another guy to look at on the line is Justin Britt. He's a guy that comes out of Missouri, definitely a talented guy that you'd want to mention. He is probably a top 15 lineman that we've got coming out this year. Another guy, you said Canarius Gates, which is awesome. Canarius Gates, you got to think of the ability that he's done with Georgia and Aaron Murray. Those guys have worked well together. When I look at offensive lines, I always look at the quarterback play because the quarterback play is always indicative of how well the offensive line is blocking for you and what they can do for you. And you look at the run game. There are some guys that are coming out this year from the lineman aspect from the SEC that are going to be guys we're going to be hearing about in Pro Bowls in the next couple of years.
All right, Stephen M., anything along the offensive front, and we'll give you first dibs on the defensive line. Yeah, we'll jump to the defense. We'll look at the defense. Obviously, we've got some of the best players coming off the board right off the bat with Jadeveon Clowney leading the way. We've talked a number of defensive linemen. Chad, a player that intrigues me, definitely, along the defensive front is Dominic Easley out of Florida, a guy that has not been able to stay on the field consistently for the last few years, but he's been extremely productive when he's been in there and has been a terror in the backfield. We talked about Dee Ford. Anybody else that jumps out at you along the defensive front? Michael Sam, of course, gets slotted as a tweener. People don't know what to do with him in regards to NFL scouts. Is he an outside linebacker? Is he a defensive end? Is he going to be that productive in the NFL? Do his skills translate? And you got Danico Autry at Mississippi State.
I mean, you got to look at some of these defensive linemen that we've got. I mean, your top, as far as depth goes, and it depends on your team. If you're a 4-3-3-4 defense set on what you go with as far as the lineman aspect. But I mean, if you're looking at, say, for example, a 4-3 defensive set, you want to look at a guy. You want to look at several guys actually. Kelsey Quarles is a guy that gets his name gets brought up. He's a top 5 guy. You mentioned Dominic Easley. Easley, yeah, he was injured. He said, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm going to go focus on the draft. And he left campus early. A lot of people question the stability of the Florida program, but that's a whole other story. We'll get into that some other point. 2 guys out of LSU you really have to pay attention to is Ego Ferguson and Anthony Johnson. Both of those guys are behemoths. They're mountains. LSU is known for putting out some defensive linemen that are absolute beasts when it comes to playing defense, just as much as Alabama has in the past as well. A guy out of Tennessee, Daniel McCullers, he's a guy you want to take a look at. There are several players that are ranked in the top 10 as far as defensive lines are concerned. They're coming out of the SEC. And out of these guys, I'll tell you who I'm high on. Eagle Ferguson and Anthony Johnson out of LSU, those are the 2 guys that I really like the most coming out, even more so than Easley and Kelsey Quarles. I just think that the defensive set that they run in LSU has these 2 guys primed and ready to jump in and probably get some playing time right off the bat.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you, Chad. I was focusing on the ends there and going down my list. Yeah, at defensive tackle, Ego Ferguson and Anthony Johnson, I believe, are both going to be very productive players in the NFL. Also want to mention, well, I believe you did, Kelsey Quarles coming out of South Carolina. On the end, opposite Jadeveon Clowney, of course, Chaz Sutton, who's a fringe prospect, doesn't project as a guy that's necessarily going to get drafted, but he'll be in an NFL camp. There's no question about that. All right, Stephen M., defensive front out of the SEC. Of course, we ran down the elite guys that are going to go in the first 2 rounds. Anybody else that jumps out at you that we've just talked about? Don't know if we've got Stephen M. with us. We'll let him jump back in on the defensive front when we get there. If he can get back with us, we'll look at the linebackers as well. Layman Barrow, a guy that's probably going to go in the first 60 picks of the NFL draft out of LSU, a guy that has had a very productive career. Check out the stats. Always among the tackle leaders in the SEC. Linebackers include Adrian Hubbard out of Alabama, Mike Mary, who probably could be a very late pick in this draft out of Ole Miss, but very much considered a character guy, a captain at Ole Miss who won the Chucky Mullins Award there. You've got Deontay Skinner coming out of Mississippi State at linebacker. Trying to not to miss anybody as we skim the linebackers. It's not a great linebacker class as linebacker classes go in the SEC compared to what we're used to. Nate Askew and Stephen Jenkins will get a look out of Texas A&M as well. Chad, does anybody really stand out as a linebacker out of this class?
I mean, there's one guy that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, and that's Avery Williamson out of Kentucky. He's a senior. He's 6'1", 238. He's going to be a guy that's probably going to be better set for a 4-3 defense. Played the middle linebacking position. Very productive. He's been really good for Kentucky. Kentucky goes sight unseen just because of their record and how they do in the SEC. But Avery Williamson is a guy that really has the potential to step in and be somebody. He's not going to be a guy that you turn around and say, oh, my gosh, who is this guy? Where did he come from? He's not going to be that guy that knocks down your door. But if you're looking at from a perspective of linebackers, he's a top 10 linebacker in this year's draft, believe it or not.
Very good. Very good. So we're looking at defensive front and linebacker, looking at the secondary. Florida, of course, had a very rough year, but at the same time, it was at defensive back that they just continue to recruit amazing secondary players, and they got 3 coming out in Marcus Roberson, Jalen Watkins, and Luchez Purifoy. Purifoy was the guy that made the big plays. He's this big splash player out of that secondary. I don't know if he's the best player. I think Marcus Roberson's probably the best player coming out of that Florida secondary. You've got Chris Davis at corner out of Auburn. If you don't know his name at this point, then I don't think you're paying too much attention. He's going to be a guy that's probably going to be counted upon in the return game in the NFL as well, out of Auburn. Cornerback E.J. Gaines, of course, was one of the big reasons Mizzou had the huge turnaround, as Missouri was one of the top interception leaders around the country. I believe they also led the SEC in interceptions along with Vanderbilt. Defensive back, I think we've got most of our great defensive backs already covered, and we've already, most of them are staying in the SEC. Bama's got a host of marginal prospects when you talk Vinny Sunseri at safety, along with Nick Perry, Deion Blue at cornerback as well, coming out of Alabama. I don't know if Stephen M. has joined us. Give us a thumbs up, Stephen M., if you're back with us. Otherwise, I've just run down the names, Chad. I don't know if there's anybody that really stands out along the defensive secondary. Of course, we've run through the big guys that are going to go in the first two rounds, but out of this next group, is there anybody that you think could be a real sleeper?
Andre Hall out of Vanderbilt, his opportunity to be a guy.
Yes.
2013 second team All-SEC, 2013 All-SEC, Thorpe Award watch list. He's been on several award watch lists. The guy, in 2012 was second team All-SEC. Coming out of school again, kind of in the same boat as Matthews. If you're able to come out of a school like Vanderbilt and be considered an all-conference guy, you're doing something. And this is a guy here that has the opportunity to come in and be a playmaker. He's 6 foot, 186 pounds. He's a Louisiana native, and Louisiana puts out some of the most professional athletes per capita of any state in the U.S. So, you've got a guy like this coming in, and he's used to being around big playmakers playing in this conference. So I think a guy like Andre Hall could be a sleeper that comes in, and eventually, one day we'll be hearing his name called too.
I'm glad you guys are catching me on some of these Vandy and Kentucky players. I will admit I was going through from team to team to team, and if anybody's watched my videos on here, they know that I've given a lot of respect to the Vanderbilt secondary over the last few years as possibly the best in the SEC, and Andre Howell, 5 interceptions last year, definitely a big part of that, probably the best player that's come out of that secondary in quite some time out of Nashville. Stephen M., if you're with us, any thoughts on the back seven defensively coming out of the SEC, guys that we haven't hit on that look to be in these first two rounds? Stephen M.
Well, now that I'm back on the camera as at this point, I have no technical difficulty there. But one of the guys that you guys have touched on, Purifoy and Marcus Roberson of Florida, I'm very high on those two guys. But I think one of the guys that I think is going to go, maybe not in the first two rounds, but late, I'm looking at Vinny Sunseri from the University of Alabama. You talk about he's a natural head hunter. He knows how to find the football, made his name as being the speed demon on special teams for the University of Alabama. Is a secure tackler, a guy. He's a coach's kid, a son of South and Sarah, with guys in the secondary and also guys on the linebacking core, on the defensive line, getting everybody set. I feel like one of Sunseri's issues is going to be that speed guy. His rehab recovery from the ACL injury he suffered in October in the regular season. His rehab is
All right, if we lose Stephen M. here, we're going to wait for him for just a second. If we lose him, we're going to move on to some special teams. And I forgot the tight ends, too. And I think Arthur Lynch is really the only guy we need to look at from the tight end position coming out from the SEC this year. But looking at the special teams, man, Chad, I automatically go to Auburn because I don't know that I saw a player, a punter, affect football games, big games, talking about the Alabama game and the national championship game against Florida State, like Stephen Clark did in pinning teams, consistently pinning teams inside the 5-yard line. Excuse me. And then they also have an excellent place kicker out of Auburn and Cody Parkey.
Yeah, you look at Stephen Clark's ability. Special teams was something that Auburn was obviously really good at. If you go back to Davis and his got a second replay, they were massively in control of the special teams. And to be quite honest, if you always hear the cliche mark, if you want to win football games, you got to have the guys in the trenches. Well, if you want to win football games and be consistent at it, you've got to have a great special teams. And we saw that Auburn did that. Another guy that's kind of been, they've got him as a place kicker, and he's probably the 4th best, is Cody Mandel out of Alabama. He's a guy that's going to probably get a chance somewhere. Kicking in special teams, as far as the kickings were concerned, a lot of these guys, you don't see them going high in drafts. You don't see guys like this. A lot of times they end up as free agents and they sign on a contract somewhere. But you definitely got 2 guys in Stephen Clark and Cody Mandel that I believe will be on teams. They will have the opportunity to be kickers for an NFL team. It's a position. Kickers is a position that changes as the wind blows. And no pun intended there, as we know, kicking is based a lot on the wind. But in reality is all it takes for you is to shank it one good time or a couple of good times in a season, and nobody's going to hear your name anymore. So these guys are going to have plenty of opportunities. There's very few names that we recognize anymore in the NFL as kickers. So I could see these 2 guys have an opportunity pretty quick.
Yeah, to keep a job in the NFL, you've not only got to keep that average around 45 yards at this point in the NFL, but you also have to directional kick, and you have to be able to pin the team inside the 10-yard line. And, again, Stephen Clark was uncanny at doing that last season at Auburn. He was a weapon for that defense that struggled at times last year, but came on down the stretch. Also, Zach Hocker out of Arkansas can really boom the football, hit a number of 50-yarders, or otherwise the Hogs may not have scored as many points as they actually did last year without him as a weapon. I'm probably going to be remiss if I don't mention the 2 corners leaving South Carolina. Jimmy Legree, very marginal prospect, is going to find a camp at some point, probably not going to be drafted, but one guy that will be drafted most likely is Victor Hampton, the corner for the Gamecocks, very good player, very fundamental techniques, played extremely well, very fundamental player, made tackles in that defense, supported the run, excellent player, a cornerback out of South Carolina. So if Stephen M's back with us, we'll give him a chance to catch up with the anything else on the secondary, anything in regards to place kickers, special teams players, and I also jumped in because I messed up on the tight ends and went right past the big guys at tight end. But we've got Arthur Lynch coming out of Georgia, and also have a possible project in Trey Burton, who played some quarterback at Florida, played substantially a quarterback who's going to try to make his way in the NFL as a tight end. And also, I missed Craig Loston. We can't forget Craig Loston coming out of LSU at safety, who's rated generally about the 7th or 8th best safety in this draft.
In LSU, they produce them. They produce secondary players down there like going to the store and picking up a box of Wheaties. I mean, they've got them everywhere. Those guys are 6 foot and above, 200 pounds, and they lay wood. That's probably, with LSU, I think LSU, in all honesty, out of all the teams in the SEC, that is probably their strong point year in and year out, is their secondary.
I would totally agree. I don't think there's any question about it. You're talking about the prototypical guys, and then we've also seen the special guys, the guys that can change plays like Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu. All right, Stephen M., you with us?
I'm here.
Excellent. Anybody else in the secondary you'd like to address, or special teams?
Well, going back to the secondary, I was addressing one of our Alabama players being Benny Sinceri. I was talking about how he's a coach's kid, son of Sal Sinceri, is a natural headhunter, is a secure tackler, not known for his speed, but can be a fast guy when need be. One thing he needs to learn is basically how to lower the boom, make big time hits on running backs and wide receivers. He's known as being more of the secure tackler. He's not the hard-hitting type safety, but understands schemes, understands how to get people in the right spots, and plays very well in zone coverage. When you talk about special teams, Mark, you hit it dead on with Auburn's Stephen Clark and Cody Parkey. Both guys exceptional players. Cody Parkey, one of the more clutch place kickers in the SEC. And Stephen Clark he does a great job of not only getting hang time on his punts, but anchoring his punts inside the opposing team's 20-yard line, backing them up and forcing them. And also with Alabama, they have a punter by the name of Cody Mandel. Cody Mandel will also be in the NFL draft. Cody Mandel from the University of Alabama averaged 47.1 yards per punt, and over half of his punts pin teams inside their own 20-yard line. So Mandel is going to be a major weapon in the NFL. And as Chad mentioned, at times we do talk about the men in the trenches, but the quickest way to the National Football League is through your foot. And if you can be an accurate place kicker and a very stable punter, you're going to make a living in the National Football League.
Yes, you are. No question about that. Gentlemen, I think we've done some yeoman's work here. I know we haven't mentioned everybody. How about Chris Smith, defensive end out of Arkansas, made a ton of big plays, tackles for loss, sack, playing opposite Trey Flowers at Arkansas. He's coming out. Trey Turner, an offensive guard out of LSU, is probably a top 5 guard in this draft. We could go on and on. The abundance of riches in this league is amazing. I would expect. Who else we throwing in there?
You can't forget Nico.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Free safety out of Mississippi State, who's an exceptional player as well. If we were doing this for the Mountain West, man, we could wrap it up in 45 minutes. But we're doing it for the SEC, and we could talk about players all afternoon that will be low-round picks or be free agents that will have a chance to play in this league and have 3, 4, 5-year careers that we haven't even hit on. But we've probably covered at least 100 players here. So, gentlemen, appreciate the time. Like to point out that we're here every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern and noon Central, SEC in 60. We talk nothing but SEC football. That's all we talk about, SEC football, for at least 60 minutes, or maybe about 100 or 115 minutes on certain days.
We should call it SEC in 120.
120. Let's go for 120. I don't think we can stop. We could go forever. I think we could probably do an Alabama 60 with Stephen M. Smith by himself.
Hey, Stephen's very well versed in all the teams now.
Yes, he is.
I like to know hard time about being a homer, but he's pretty well versed.
Oh, no doubt about that. I found that out very quickly when I had him on a couple weeks ago, and he dove into everybody else in the SEC very capably. So don't need to pigeonhole Stephen M., but I think it's Alabama 60 minutes full for him, and then we're just scratching the surface at that point. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we're here every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern and noon Central. Again, it's SEC in 60. It's a show hosted by myself, Mark Rogers TV, and also Chad Neipling of SEC Sports Insider, who's got the autograph. Who'd you get the autographs from? It was Coney Ely?
Yeah, Ely, and I got D-Max on here too, man, from
Nice.
Arkansas when I went up and caught that game.
And also one of our main guys here, Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama, touchdownalabama.net. You can find Chad at SEC Sports Insider. Follow him on Twitter. And he's got quite the following of SEC sports fans, and it's just not football for him. He covers it all. You cannot imagine the amount of information and insight that he has into all SEC sports. And as I found out in the last few weeks with Stephen M., man, he's all over the NBA. He's all over everything. There's nothing that he doesn't see at some point. And for me, I'm only Mark Rogers TV, and we do our best to cover college football from coast to coast. So again, please join us every Monday at 1 Eastern and noon Central. Gentlemen, we appreciate the time and the information and the insight. Couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you, Mark.